Today is Thursday, February 9th, 2000, and I am here with Selma Marks, a 1956 graduate of the University of Arizona College of Law. My name is Vicki Fleischer, and I'm going to be asking you a few questions, Ms. Marks. Can you tell me how you decided to go to law school?
You'll be shocked. I didn't like the women's organizations and meetings. They gave me headaches and I found them frustrating. And so I decided I'd like to go back to school, having already had a bachelor's degree in psychology. And so I decided to go to law school just because of that.
Well, that sounds like a good enough reason to me. A lot of people don't have a reason at all. So tell me, did you apply to anywhere besides the University of Arizona for law school?
No, I was married, had 2 children, and couldn't possibly have left Tucson.
Mm-hmm. And what was the admissions policy like when you applied? Was it difficult to get into law school then?
There wasn't any policy. I went to visit the dean, and he asked me a little bit about myself and what I was doing, and I said, I'm just a housewife. And he said, don't ever say just a housewife. That was the interview for law school.
And then you just sent in your fee and you started, huh?
I started with just 2 courses a semester.
Mm-hmm.
And so that was 1950, and it took me 6 years instead of 3 to complete my studies.
How was it being there for 6 years? You must have seen a lot of students go through.
I saw a lot of students, but I missed the interaction with the students because I would rush to class and then rush home to take care of my familial duties.
Right, right. How many women were in the school when you were there?
I'm not sure. There may have been as many as 6, but I was the only one in my graduating class.
Oh, goodness, only one.
Mm-hmm.
How many other people were in your graduating class?
I don't think the number has changed terribly vis-a-vis today's graduating classes.
Mm-hmm.
I'm not sure of the number, but it was more than I would guess probably at this point.
Mm-hmm. And who was the dean when you were there? Was it Dean Lyons?
Dean Lyons, John Lyons.
So that was who you interviewed with.
Correct.
Great. What was he like?
He was a very sincere, dedicated, straightforward kind of person. Very gentle, though.
Mm-hmm. And did he teach any of your class?
Yes, he taught contracts, and later I think I took family law from him. I think it was called domestic relations at the time.
Right. How many other faculty were there at the law school?
Probably no more than 6 or 7 is my guess.
Mm-hmm. Were there adjunct teachers?
Rarely.
Okay. So you must have had the same professor for several subjects then.
No, 2 perhaps.
Okay.
And Chuck Ayers, who was either still a student or just freshly graduated, took over Professor Claude Evidence class, and Claude Brown was his name, and he became ill in the middle of the semester. And someone had to step into his shoes for the very important evidence class. And Chuck Ayers also arrived on the scene to teach what was then called code pleading, which was a required course.
I see. So Charles Ayers was your classmate for a while, and then your professor.
Correct.
That's a very interesting situation. I bet you're one of the few people who are in that unique situation. Were there any minorities in your classes?
Very few. There might have been 1 or 2 Hispanics. I don't recall any Asians, any blacks.
Was Raul Castro in that group?
No, he was ahead of me. Raul is 83 now.
Oh.
He was in The 40s, I think, yeah. Was there a law review at the time?
A very primitive one compared with the one we have today. Nothing very formal at all.
Did they have summer school?
Yes.
Did you take summer classes?
Yes, I did. I took water law one summer. And I'm trying to remember if corporations had been offered in summer school. It seems to me I took that one summer.
If your classmates didn't take summer school, what did they do in the summertime, do you know?
Many of them worked.
Where did they work?
Some worked in markets, stacking produce. Some worked in gasoline stations because there wasn't self-service at that time. And I think probably a very few sought work in law offices, but there wasn't much available.
So pretty much non-legal jobs that
Right.
they worked. It's interesting. It's different from now. You're aware that the law school now has several in-house clinical programs.
Yes.
Was there any type of practical type of clinical or trial advocacy class when you were there?
Not that I recall.
What were the student and faculty interactions like at the time?
If a student really wanted advice or conversation, it was possible usually to make an appointment. There wasn't a big open door policy. I don't know of any student who felt that he or she couldn't speak with a professor, but I think it was probably more formal than it is today.
What were the job prospects like when you graduated?
It's hard for me to say in terms of statistics because having a supporting and supportive husband and family, I just wasn't really into seeking employment right at graduation. And then I had a third child very shortly after graduation. And so my first job, which came through Raul Castro, who was then county attorney, was a part-time job as a deputy county attorney. And that was really the only job I sought.
Sounds perfect for your situation.
It was. I worked part-time for the county attorney and part-time for legal aid. And it was the sort of job that I could tailor to my needs because I wanted to be here when my children left for school in the morning and when they came home in the afternoon. So I could sandwich the hours in between.
That's great. Which type of work did you prefer, the county attorney or the legal aid?
I can't say that I preferred one over the other. I was in a pretty limited area in each office because for the county attorney I did mostly family support cases. And for legal aid there was a little more variety, but not a lot. It was landlord, tenant, the same sort of things that
They
are
still
there
do.
today.
Yeah, that's true. What was the bar exam like when you graduated?
Oh, I thought it was just horrible. It was a physical challenge. I found it more of a physical challenge than a mental challenge.
Was it 3 days when you took it?
It was 2.5.
Okay.
And I liked my 3 meals a day, and we were not allowed time off for lunch. And we could go to lunch, but that was at our risk. And so my husband brought me sandwiches both days, and it was an embarrassment because he brought smelly kind of sandwiches, and the room in which we were sitting began to take on the odor of my lunch. But that was really the most difficult part for me.
And tell me about graduation. What was that ceremony like?
Well, it was exciting for me because the newspapers came and took pictures of me with my family because I was the only woman in
Oh, wow.
the graduating
You were
class.
famous. Yeah.
And I had a party here at this house. I've lived in this house 50 years. And we had a graduation party, and the dean and some of the professors came, as well as friends and family. And that's what I remember most about graduation.
Oh, it sounds like it was a nice time. Now, your husband, did he go to the law school as well before you, or did he go to school somewhere else?
He went to Columbia Law
Okay.
School.
Okay, but was he a practicing lawyer at the time that you were in school?
No, he was 13 years older than I.
Okay.
And he moved to Tucson. Well, it gets confusing because I was married twice. My first husband died when I was, after I had the two children. He was only 47 when he died. And then I married Jack Marks, who was a Superior Court judge, and he's the one who went to law school at Columbia and moved to Tucson in 1950.
Ah, I see.
And he practiced with Mo Udall and Chuck Ayers.
Wow.
And Jean Ayers, Chuck's wife,
Yeah.
was Jack's secretary. And when Chuck Ayers spoke at Jack's memorial service, Chuck said that the reason his wife Jean had such a successful pregnancy was that she did a lot of walking because Jack would pace while he dictated, and she would have to follow him with her pad.
Well, times haven't changed. I see lots of people pacing in the law school still. Tell me about some of your classmates and what they did after law school.
It's really hard for me to tell you because, as I've said, I had really little contact with them in law school. But in my graduating class were Chuck Ayers and Stan Feldman, who, as you know, went on to become a Chief Justice of the Arizona Supreme Court. I'm not sure about Bill. Yes, Bill Browning was a classmate, and my first jury trial was when Bill Browning was in private practice.
Oh.
And I was prosecuting a case, and Bill was representing the defendant, and I got a guilty verdict. So I've always reminded Bill of that.
Good for you. I have a couple questions, specific questions about your classes in law school. I'm sure you're aware, Selma, since you're very involved with the school still, that we have a lot of elective courses now. Clinics and a lot of trial practice type of classes, as well as just, I think, a wide variety of electives. Were there a lot of electives when you were in school?
I don't know what you mean by a lot. There certainly was a fairly wide range of electives. I've been on the board of visitors for many years, and I can remember my very first meeting when I was asked to speak before the group at the end of our collective meetings with students and professors. And I feel today, as I felt then, that there's not enough emphasis on the academic basis, the philosophy of law and the history of law. I realize that the clinical approach is very helpful and important, but I think equally important is some of the less clinical approach. And I regret that there hasn't been as much emphasis on that as I would like to see.
Well, Dean Massaro would certainly agree with you that you can't forget the other parts just for the practical, I know that. Tell me about your reading assignments in law school. What were they like?
It was casework, totally. We had textbooks that consisted of cases, and we would just read the cases and recite them by rote if we were called upon. And I feel and hope that today there's more emphasis on independent thought. And supposedly, when one goes to law school, one is taught to think.
Yeah.
And I hope there's more of that today. I had the feeling that we did a lot of memorization.
Mm-hmm. And not as much independent thinking.
Correct.
Like, I see.
Until a final exam came along.
And then you better have some good
Right.
independent thinking. Yeah. So tell me about the final exams. What were they like?
I found them difficult. I used to try to study by outlining the casework that we had had and the discussions in class, such as they were. As I just said, I don't think there was as much discussion. I don't know what happens today.
Mm-hmm.
But generally, in retrospect, I think a lot of the questions related to case law that had just recently taken place.
Ah.
And it was a challenge to try to fit in the casework that we had done and apply it to the new situation.
Mm-hmm. How long were the exams usually?
It seems to me that they were no more than 3 hours.
Mm-hmm. Not like the bar exam. Did you have to write papers in law school?
No, I never had to.
Mm-hmm.
It was simply classwork, case recitation, and not even midterms.
Hmm.
It was mostly just I guess our grades were based on our classroom participation and our final exam grades.
Mm-hmm. Let's talk about grades for a minute. When you started law school, we've heard a lot of stories from people about how they sat at orientation and were told, look to your right, look to your left, you know, some of you won't be here. Was that the atmosphere when you were in school?
It certainly was.
Mm-hmm.
It
So
certainly was. There was great attrition.
how did they weed people out?
Grades.
Mm-hmm. And was the teaching technique Socratic primarily?
Yes, it was. And when I say grades as being responsible for attrition, even attendance mattered, because there were students who would sign up for law school and they were admitted and registered, and then they just didn't show up regularly.
Oh.
And so, of course, they went down the tube.
How many people would you say graduated in your class? I know you were there for a while, but say in 1956.
I wish I could tell you.
Half or 3/4, would you say, or?
Oh, you mean of those who registered? Yes. Oh, probably not much more than half.
Huh. Wow.
But I don't want to be held accountable for that figure. The law school has
We've heard
more
that. We've heard
accurate
that.
records.
We won't hold you accountable. Tell me about some of your favorite professors.
I can tell you about a very non-favorite
Okay.
professor.
That's a better question. Let's hear that.
I really felt cheated in criminal law and constitutional law. The same professor taught those classes.
Mm-hmm.
And in retrospect, and when I think of someone like Tony Massaro and a few others who've come down the path since my days in school, I just didn't learn enough about, especially about constitutional law. And I realize I can't blame the professor entirely, but I do think with a more challenging and erudite individual, I would have come out a better lawyer.
Mm-hmm. Well, you should come sit in on some of Dean Massaro's classes. They're quite good. I did recently.
I still have lots to learn, that's
Yeah.
for sure.
Well, that proves you're a good lawyer, if you know that, right?
Oh, I know that.
Do you know, at the time when you were in school, if the professors were required to publish in the same way that they are now?
I don't think it was in the same way they are now. I am sure that publishing helped them, not only insofar as their research, which must have been beneficial to their own psyches, but just organizing their thoughts and putting them down should have been most helpful in their teaching.
Do you know the backgrounds of any of your professors, where they came from?
Oh, I know that Chuck Ayers had clerked for Justice Douglas in the United States Supreme Court. I don't know much about the other professors. John Lyons, I know, had lived in Tucson a long time. I believe at some point had been in private practice. And there was a general from the United States Army who came and taught legal ethics.
Huh.
And I believe that was the only course he took. I don't know whether he came from Davis-Monthan or elsewhere. But we had a great joke about him because one of his admonitions in legal ethics was, be sure that you wear clean shirts every day. Don't ever try to wear the same shirt 2 days. And we all looked at him in amazement because he was always wearing dark brown, dark blue, dark green shirts. And we wondered how many times he wore them before he had them laundered.
Especially being in the military, you probably had a
Right.
standard closet full of white shirts or brown shirts or whatever. Tell me about the Douglas Building where you attended classes in law school. What was it like?
Well, it had a lot of dignity. And the library, of course, was much smaller. But going into that library with rooms that just were more awesome, I think lent a nice flavor to studies. Unfortunately, as I said earlier, I did not spend much time in the building. I would rush to class and then rush away.
Yeah.
There was the big wide sidewalk out front where students would pitch pennies. I suppose today if they pitch any place, they would be pitching something more like the new gold dollar coins or something.
What was happening in the world at the time that you were in law school? What was going on then?
Well, it was a long time. Lots happened in 6 years.
Yeah.
It was after World War II, and I think I started in 50, so there were a lot of students coming back and utilizing the GI Bill, which must have been a blessing for many, many students. And I was just so wrapped up in my family life and duties that I wasn't much involved. I did go to the 1956 Democratic Convention with my husband, who was very much involved in Democratic politics, and attended that convention with Mo Udall and his wife.
And where was the convention?
Chicago.
Ah, must have been exciting.
It was. It certainly was. We were all invited to a party given by Averill Harriman, and that was a treat.
Yeah. So you may not be able to answer this next question because you had so much outside demands on your time when you were in law school, but was there anything dynamic that was going on inside the law school that you remember that you would want to pass on to people watching this in the future?
Dynamic encompasses a wide range.
Mm-hmm.
I have no idea what the relationship was among the faculty
Mm-hmm.
or the staff. I know that Dean Lyons commanded a lot of respect, and I'm sure there was interaction among the faculty, but
Mhm.
I really wasn't aware
Mm-hmm.
of anything in particular,
Mhm.
Any interesting stories that you heard
Right.
that was going on in the law school or anything, or no?
not that I can think of at the moment, and I really wasn't privy
Yeah.
to much that went on.
Yeah. Okay, now we're getting to the real philosophical questions, so I think you're going to like these, given what you've said so far. What would you say is the defining characteristic of the University of Arizona Law School now?
The defining characteristic. Today, I repeat what I said earlier. I think it's much more practically oriented. I don't get the feel that there is tremendous philosophic thought. I get the impression when I walk in, as I do often, that there is tremendous emphasis about what am I going to do when I get out? How am I going to pay this humongous debt that I have acquired? And there just is less of a dreamlike quality about it, as far as I can see. Very practical.
So this will dovetail right into that. If you were going to change one thing about legal education, what would it be?
You've heard me.
There you go. So less emphasis, or continued emphasis on the practical.
Continued, but more, much more on the thought-provoking process. And I have not sat in on any classes for some time now. Perhaps there is more of what I'm talking about, but my recollection was that we read cases and we repeated what we had read, and we were not imbued with a sense of love of the law, even then. And I have a feeling today that's even more lacking, the feeling of, I can only characterize it as love for the law.
That's interesting. So if you were going to convey a message to someone who's going to graduate in 2005 from the U of A Law School, what would your message be to them?
To study the philosophy of law, to realize through well-taught classes, which I hope would be the case, that there's a duty involved with the study of law, that one owes society a debt to do pro bono work, to be philanthropic, even if a small amount is all one can afford, just getting into the pattern of realizing that it's important to help those in need in whatever way one can. And I find that sorely lacking today in working with alumni. It's an ongoing problem to get a sense of caring and loyalty to the college.
Good message. Good message. What would you like to see the law school accomplish in the future?
It's objective in its duty of turning out the sort of student I've described. A well-educated, motivated student who cares about the law and realizes there are wonderful things that can be done with that career.
That sounds like an excellent goal. Is there anything you'd like to add that I haven't asked you about?
I think you've been very comprehensive.
Oh.
I wish my memory were sharp enough to answer your questions more accurately.
You have been very helpful, and I very much appreciate it. Thank you for your time.
You're
Thanks.
very
Could I
welcome.
just ask a follow-up? You were, excuse me, a married student. How many students would you say were married at the time?
Many of the men were married. There was one married student from Phoenix who commuted
Oh my.
because ASU did not have a law school then.
Mhm.
And I'm not sure if it was her first pregnancy, but she commuted while she was pregnant and subsequently, I think, delivered twins. I'm not sure.
Quite impressive. Wow.
Also, were many of the students from out of state or mostly Arizona or?
I think mostly Arizona.
Okay. What would you say the average age was?
Not as varied as it is, or not as elderly probably as it is today. I would say the average age was closer to 30, but I could be way off.
And that's because of the GI Bill, a lot of people coming back. Right.
Correct.
Yeah.
But there wasn't the emphasis then on taking students who had had other careers, such as we have today with doctors who practiced until retirement and then decided to go to law school. There was hardly any of that.
So this was a first career for most people.
For
First and
most,
only.
yes.
Great.
Great.
That's it.
Great.
Thank you very much. That was
You're
great.
very welcome.